ofrece muchas oportunidades, muchos retos. Y un poco como ayer hablamos de diferentes redes, se habló de Facebook, por supuesto, estuvo Naomi haciendo una excelente presentación sobre comparando Facebook con Instagram también. También el presentador de Coca-Cola nos mencionó un caso de Pinterest muy interesante, donde traían a la vida un panel de Pinterest a una de las consumidoras de Coca-Cola. Quería traer un poco de información de contexto para que sepamos realmente, cuando hablamos de estas redes, de qué estamos hablando en términos de número de usuarios. Y tenía esta información, que es de inicios del 2016, sobre el tamaño o la cantidad de usuarios que tiene cada una de las redes sociales. La primera de lejos es Facebook. Tiene más de 1.500 millones de usuarios. Todavía es la red más grande, aunque las demás están creciendo muy rápidamente. Y la segunda, curiosamente, no es Instagram ni Twitter, ¿no? Es WhatsApp. WhatsApp en realidad no es una red social propiamente dicha, pero bueno, acá que levante la mano el que no tiene por lo menos 25 grupos de WhatsApp en su celular, ¿no? Nos comunicamos mucho, es la red creo que más usamos, inclusive muchos más que Facebook para comunicarnos en grupo. Entonces, de alguna manera ya representa una red social también. Y luego tenemos con números menores, pero como les decía, creciendo muy rápidamente a Instagram, a Twitter, Snapchat, Pinterest y LinkedIn, que es una red profesional de un perfil muy especial porque es la única red que tiene mayor cantidad de usuarios mayores de 35 años que menores. Entonces, es una forma bien eficiente de llegar a cierto público de manera específica también, ¿no? Y algunas estadísticas rápidas para tener la idea de ese tamaño de movimiento. Tenemos más de 500 millones de tweets que se envían diariamente a nivel mundial, más de 70 millones de fotos y videos que se postean diariamente, y LinkedIn crece muy rápidamente porque hay cada minuto hay 2 profesionales nuevos que se agregan a esta red. Entonces, más pruebas de que es un mundo dinámico y que lo digital está creciendo, está muy claro, ¿no? Pero bueno, el día de hoy vamos a dar una mirada diferente a lo que es el marketing, siempre dentro de este contexto de la era digital, de la cual no podemos escapar. Y vamos a dar un enfoque más de insights del consumidor. Tenemos hoy día presentaciones de Acuity, que es todo lo relacionado a neuromarketing, eye tracking, de Ipsos, donde nos va a dar una mirada diferente a lo que es el branding. Y finalmente vamos a terminar con Leo Burnett, que nos va a explicar cómo conectar mejor, cómo comunicar mejor con nuestro segmento objetivo a través del storytelling. Entonces, como el tema de hoy es insights del consumidor y cómo comunicarnos a través de insights, quería mostrarles esta caricatura de David Somerville, que posteó el profesor Daniel Falcón hace un tiempo en su Facebook, y yo la uso siempre al inicio de mi curso de investigación de mercados porque me parece muy ilustrativa de lo que es pasar de la data a lo que es un insight, ¿no? Y empezamos con la data. Hay mucha data, estamos rodeados de datos por todas partes, fuentes primarias, secundarias, ahora que hay redes sociales y mundo digital, mucha más data. Cuando le damos sentido con algún objetivo y encontramos puntos comunes, llegamos a lo que es la información. Cuando finalmente vinculamos esa información con algún sentido, ya podemos decir que estamos hablando de conocimiento, pero solamente cuando encontramos aquellos puntos relevantes que hacen una diferencia, que parten de lo que realmente el consumidor siente, necesita, esos aspectos ocultos, no evidentes, que son una oportunidad de negocio, podemos hablar de lo que es un insight, ¿no? Claro, si ya relacionamos más de un insight juntos, podemos hablar que estamos en el nivel de la sabiduría, ¿no? del conocimiento superior. Entonces, este es el reto que enfrentamos, tanto los que estamos investigando al consumidor como a cargo de las marcas, como en el mundo académico también, de pasar de tanta información disponible ahora a llegar a lo que es realmente un insight de consumidor que genere conocimiento, que lleve la acción y que genere bienestar para las personas, porque antes que consumidores todos somos personas, ¿no? Y es en eso que tiene que enfocarse el marketing, en las personas. Y bueno, para empezar entonces, recordarles que nuestro hashtag es Marketing Summit UP. Ayer hemos sido trending topic en redes en la mañana, gracias a ustedes, a sus tweets. Así es que esperemos que hoy día también sea así. Y el primer tema de hoy, que es acerca de eye tracking y neuromarketing, es para nosotros de un interés muy especial, porque en la Universidad del Pacífico los alumnos de la carrera de marketing tienen a su disposición un laboratorio de eye tracking y de lectura de expresiones faciales. Lo tenemos a partir de este año y estamos trabajando mucho en proyectos de investigación con los alumnos, con los profesores, y es en realidad un área nueva en la que estamos experimentando, tratando de combinar otras metodologías y tratando de llegar a insights que sean valiosos para poder implementar estrategias eficientes. Por eso es que el tema de hoy en la mañana, con el que empezamos la jornada de hoy, es muy relevante para nosotros y esperemos que sea también de su interés. Tenemos como invitado de la primera presentación al doctor Tim Holmes. Tim representa realmente el encuentro entre el mundo académico y el mundo empresarial. Él es director de Acuity Intelligence, es graduado en matemática de Sheffield University en Inglaterra. Luego estudió psicología e hizo su PhD en neurociencias visuales, toma de decisiones y percepción en la Royal Holloway University de Inglaterra, donde actualmente se sigue desempeñando como investigador y profesor. En el 2011 fundó Acuity Intelligence, que se define a sí misma como una empresa de investigación basada en principios científicos, especializada en aplicaciones reales de eye tracking, biometría y neurociencias cognitivas. En los últimos 5 años ha trabajado en proyectos de investigación y desarrollo para compañías tan diversas como P&G, Coca-Cola, Unilever, Ralph Lauren, The Guardian y Walt Disney Company, para evaluar y optimizar medios digitales, diseño de empaques, aplicaciones móviles y estrategias de marketing. Como educador, Tim ha desarrollado e implementado programas de neurociencias para un amplio rango de clientes académicos y comerciales, siendo invitado con frecuencia en diversos medios de comunicación. Su tema de hoy es Now You See Me, Now You Don't, How Good Are We at Spotting Copycat Brands, que va a ver todo el tema de cuando una marca copia el diseño de otra y eso cómo influye en el comportamiento del consumidor ya en el anaquel, en el punto de venta. Bueno, sin más, recibimos con un fuerte aplauso al doctor Tim Holmes de Acuity. Por favor, Tim.
Oh, good morning. In keeping with the theme of digital trends, I just want to get everybody to raise their hands a sec and just say that you're willing to accept cookies in this presentation, because I have cookies. We're actually going to talk about these. I think I got the wrong end of the stick when we actually, someone explained about cookies to me. There was a time when it seemed a little strange to be a neuroscientist speaking at marketing conferences. But I had a stopwatch running yesterday, and it took about 18 minutes for neuroscience to get mentioned at this event, and it was mentioned in every single one of the presentations. And so I'm going to pick up on some of those themes as we go through today. But what I'm going to talk to you about are these things called copycat brands. But first of all, let's just talk about some of the brands you met yesterday. You met Facebook, you met Coca-Cola, and you also met Procter & Gamble. 3 of the biggest brands on the planet. I'm going to introduce you to a 4th brand, one of the smallest brands on the planet, Acuity Intelligence. So this is a little company that I started in the UK about 5 years ago, and what we specialize in is biometrics, and particularly eye tracking, and the application of neuroscientific methods to commercial research questions. And you can see here, these are just some of the crazy things we get up to. We don't just run research, we take a lot of time to educate and help people to understand how to get the best value out of some of the methodologies that we use. Small brand, big friends. These are the companies that we've worked with in the last 5 years. So anybody who's thinking about what they can do when they finish at university, start a company and get to work with some of these people, because you'll have the best time. So, I want to talk to you about these things. These are what we call copycat brands. The products, these are from the UK. The products on the right-hand side of the screen are the copycats. The ones on the left are actual branded products. So you'll recognize Head & Shoulders and the Boots copycat on the right. So what is a copycat brand? Well, typically, it's an own label or private label product. It might also be an unfamiliar, newly starting brand. So there was mention yesterday that how similar the Pepsi-Cola logo was when it first came out, and it had to then differentiate itself from Coca-Cola. The packaging will typically mimic an existing target brand, and that target brand will almost certainly be a category leader. It will be a signpost brand for the category. Now, these own label products are usually cheaper, And sometimes they appear in store alongside the actual branded products. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just sit there on their own. Now, I was having a look at the statistics for Peru, and in Peru, you don't actually have a huge market in terms of own-label products. You're typically around about 7% of grocery sales over here are own-label. In the UK, we're one of the world's leaders for this. It's nearer 50% in the UK for grocery. Over 150 examples of these things in the marketplace. And just to put this into context, in the UK alone, own label represents about £19 billion worth of business. Now, thanks to Brexit, that value of that £19 billion is probably only about $5 at this point, but it's still quite significant for our market. 50%, as I say, in the major supermarkets. In some of the stores, has anyone heard of Aldi or Lidl? So these are German supermarkets, and they specialize in these copycat products. It's about 88% of their product is own label. Now, there was a study done by a consumer magazine called Which in the UK that actually looked at how people were affected by these products. And about 18% of their sample reported that they buy these products not because they're cheaper, but because they look like the branded products. Moreover, 20% of the sample, of that 18%, said that they bought them by mistake. So they'd actually gone out to buy the branded product, and they'd come back with a copycat and had that shock when they got home. They felt cheated, they felt disappointed, but you know what? They got that final moment of truth because they sampled the own label product, and then they started to question the price they were paying for the branded product. So this accounts to about £1 billion worth of business that's just leaking away from the brands just because the products look similar. And if you've ever wondered why IP lawyers make so much money, it's to try and get some of this back. This is how they're marketed in the UK.
Sometimes it's nice to swap. If you swap from your own supermarket to Aldi, you could save up to 50% on all these products.
So that's a very typically English saucy advert, right? There's an explicit message going on there, which is that if you shop at Aldi, you're going to halve your grocery bill. But there's an implicit message as well. Those products that came in on the left were the real branded products that weren't on sale in Aldi. The ones on the right are the own label brands that are in Aldi. And the suggestion is that these two are absolutely equivalent. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk to you about a specific piece of research that we ran in association with GlaxoSmithKline and the British Brand Group. And we used technology that's very common in the neuromarketing toolkit these days. It's called eye tracking. Does exactly what it says on the tin, no mystery about it. It tracks where people are looking when they're actually looking at products, at applications, digital displays, and so on. This is becoming a very prevalent technology. You will start to see it being integrated with laptops for testing in people's homes. It's almost certainly going to be a mainstay of any virtual reality system in the second-generation headsets. So eye tracking is going to be very big news, and it's a technique that you probably want to get quite familiar with. And I'm going to talk about a sort of shopper journey. I'm going to talk about the process of people actually searching the fixtures at point of sale. And I'm going to talk about people making a decision. So that point at which they mistakenly identify that copycat product for the branded product. This obviously has consequences at the checkout, consequences on the bottom line, but what I'm going to focus on are these two bits right now. Before I do that, I need to dig in to a little bit to the way we actually search and make decisions. And so this is hopefully going to give you a bit more background on some of the things that Mikhail mentioned yesterday if you were in the talk. So I'm actually a visual neuroscientist, so I specialize in the way our eyes move and the way we process the visual information. And there's been a lot of academic research on the way we search for things. So if I show you this, hopefully everybody can spot the red T quite easily, right? Yes. There we go. All right, this is going to be a game. You're going to have to play along. Tell me, is it easier to spot the green L now? Yes. That's what marketers call standout. It's what scientists call pop-out. It's exactly the same thing. The reason that pops out to you is because it differs from everything else around it by just one way, okay? And in this case, it's color. If I ask you now to find the green T, tell me if this is harder. Yeah. Takes longer, right? Because what you can't do is you can't just deselect everything that's not green because there's green L's there, and you can't just deselect everything that's not a T because there's other shapes. Now, this is what forces what we call a serial search. It's a slower process. But hey, this isn't a very realistic representation of what happens in the real world. This is the kind of thing that we academics love to do in the lab, but when you get out there, this is more the kind of thing that people are searching at the supermarket shelf. So it's a full fixture, full of product, very complex scene. So how do they go about making the decision that they found the product? So let's switch over to here, and I'm going to talk briefly about heuristics. So hopefully everybody at this point is familiar with Daniel Kahneman and the cognitive biases literature. I'm not going to dig into that too much, but what I'm going to talk about is something called the availability heuristic. So this is one of the processes that drives automatic decision-making. And what it means is we have a tendency to make a decision before we have all the necessary information and complete information to make the correct decision. So we make mistakes. So in this situation, imagine that I'm looking for my packet of rich tea. Okay? I'm an Englishman, I drink tea, I want a cookie with it. So what's the most identifiable thing about that pack? It's color, right? And so the first thing that people will remember when they're at point of sale is, well, I know I'm looking for rich tea, it's blue. I can deselect everything from that array that is not blue. That makes it quite quick for me to find those products, but there's still quite a lot to search. Well, I might remember that my pack had this sort of light orangey color on the corner, a picture of a cookie, which helps me to deselect a couple more. We heard yesterday that processing words is much slower than processing pictures. And so I might actually then start to look at the text on the pack. And I know I'm looking for rich tea, so I'm going to look for those words. At this point, I can deselect, and I'm down to just 2 on the shelf. But in terms of what I, as a consumer, remember about my product, that's probably about as much as I'm going to remember. And what that means is I'm going to make the decision based on the one that I'm actually looking at first. The one that I see that most rapidly meets that criteria will be the one that I pick up. So let me show you our study. These were the 8 brands that we actually tested. So you can see we covered 4 different categories. We didn't just do cookies. We also did shampoos, we did cereals, and we did baking butter, right? The reason we did different categories was because the products are different sizes. And one of the things that affects people's ability to make an accurate decision is actually how well they can see a product. So the bigger cereal packs, we expected to perform better here. These are the copycats. Just take a moment to look at that. That's how closely they resemble these products on the shelf. It's quite a challenge, right? All righty. So this being a sort of scientific study, we had some conditions. We wanted to test an actual causality effect. So first of all, we presented some of our shelves, and they were full of product, but they had just the brand on there. They didn't have that copycat product present. On some of our shelves, they had the copycat only and not the brand. On some of our shelves, we had them both. Now, that's a situation that occurs in certain stores in the UK, like Tesco. And because we wanted to see just how good people were at general decision-making, we also had a null condition where we were telling them to look for products that weren't on the shelf at all, just to see what they'd do, and it's quite interesting. And I said I'm a vision scientist, so I also wanted to see how the actual function of vision was playing into this. Now, you might not know this, but you only have a very small region in the center of your visual field where you have full color and high-resolution vision. We call it the fovea, and it's about 2 degrees across. That's about the size of your thumbnail if you hold out your arm at arm's length. The rest of your vision has progressively less color as you move out into the periphery. It also gets lower res, so actually it gets more blurry as you move out into the periphery. The reason you don't perceive the world this way is because your eyes are moving all the time, unconsciously, and they're helping your brain to construct a full focus, full color version of that visual scene. So I wanted to see how much it might be working, these effects might play out in peripheral vision, because that's really important when you're shopping. So sometimes we showed the packs as they would appear. Sometimes we showed the packs blurred. Now this means you can still use all the color cues, but you can't use the detail on the packs. You can't read the words quite so easily. Sometimes we took the color out, and we left it all nice and sharp. And finally, we made it really difficult for our participants. We did blurred and desaturated. It's very hard to find those, but people managed it. Now, fairly small sample by marketing standards. 49 people were run through this study. That's actually not bad for an eye tracking study. They actually all saw 64 different shelves as they did it. So actually, the data that I'm going to show you is averaged over 3,136 trials. You can see the gender split and the age distribution on the bar chart. What did the trials look like? First of all, we showed people the brand that we wanted them to look for. We never asked them to look for a copycat product. They didn't know those copycat products were on the shelf. At no point was that mentioned in this study. Then we showed them the actual shelf. Now, just to be clear, this shelf was on a 236-inch touchscreen. So this is actually full life-size shelf, okay? The products were actually calibrated so that the screen was calibrated so the products were accurate to life size. No shadows cast on the screen, it's all rear projection. We showed them the shelves for 10 seconds. Remember we heard yesterday that about 10 seconds is when people start to give up. So we wanted to see how people did in that kind of time scale. In this case, the product that we'd have expected them to go for is in the top right-hand corner. It's actually the copycat version of Cocoa Pops. We never presented our copycats or our branded products in the center of the screen because we knew that's where people would be looking after they'd read the brand name. Every shelf had a different configuration. You could never use what you'd seen before to help you on any of the other stimuli. So we also wanted to see how people were consciously responding, so not just their eye movements, but we wanted to see when they made the decision. So we gave them a button, and we said, OK, push this button when you have found the brand. Remember, we were looking for just the brand. If they did that, we stopped the clock. Otherwise, after 10 seconds, we just put up a blank screen and errored out the trial. 64 trials for every participant. We showed them in 4 blocks of 16, randomized, counterbalanced, all that good stuff. And we had a quick questionnaire after, and there's some interesting stuff that comes out of that, which I'll mention towards the end. Okay, this not the most active video on the world, but this is actually multi-camera view on what was happening at the testing facility. So you can see here the size of that screen. You can see our participants standing in front. If it was a little bit brighter, you'd be able to see that there was an eye tracker in front of that guy that was recording his eye movement 60 times a second. What you can see here, these red dots are actually his eye movements, his fixations as he searches the shelf. So what did we find? Well, you can't do an eye tracking presentation to marketers without actually showing them a heat map. So I'm going to show you a heat map, and then this is the only heat map I'm going to show you, because the data is actually more important here than the heat map. This is just to show you that the participants were actually doing the experiment that we wanted them to do. So in that top corner there, you can see all the attention on the branded product, and down here you can see the majority of the attention is on the brand and the copycat. Now this is the blurred black and white version, so you can see they were still able to do the task. So Mikhail said 4 seconds to make a decision at point of sale yesterday. Yes. 3.5 seconds was how long it took our participants to find the brand on average across these 4 categories. How long did it take them when just the copycat was there? Well, remember, the brand wasn't there. They should never really have found it at all, but their attention goes to the copycat products in 3.8 seconds. So it's well within that same window, just slightly slower. What happens when the two are presented together? Who's going to win that race, do you think? The copycat gets a lift. It actually gets looked at about just under a second earlier than the branded product. So remember that availability heuristic? The copycat is now way ahead in that race because it's got your attention. The shoppers are actually seeing that first. What about the decision making? So first of all, let's see how many times people got things wrong. So in the null condition, there was no brand, so people should never have pushed the button. So if they did, it was an error. What I've done is I've split out the serial and the non-serial packs in this one, so you can see the difference. You can see how much lower the error rate is on those big serial packs where people can see the images a little bit better. So pack size really plays into this process. 17% of the time, people are getting it wrong on the smaller packs when there's no product there. They're saying the product is there. So that's just a general error rate across this process. In the brand condition, 25% of the time, people are actually not being able to find our brand that we've asked them to look for. So that's kind of bad for the brands in a way, because we had recruited participants that actually were familiar with these brands. We knew that they shopped for these brands on a regular basis, and they still struggled to find them on our supermarket shelf. When the copycats and brands are presented together, that error rate doesn't change very much. But have a look at this. In the condition when just the copycat is there, they should never have pushed the button because they were told to look for the brand. The error rate goes up to 53%. That's chance. Our participants would have been just as good if we had turned off the screen, given them a coin to flip, and say, guess whether we're going to show you the brand or not. So they're not consciously processing those visual images of the copycats. So where were they looking when they did push the button, when they did make a conscious decision? In the null condition, of course, there isn't any of our products to look at, so they're just looking at some other product on the shelf. In the brand-only condition, most of the time, they're looking at the brand when they push the button. They're doing it right. What do the copycats steal in attention when they appear? 26% of the time now, our participants are looking directly at those copycat products and saying, yep, that's the brand. I'm going to push the button. I've got it right. And they've got it completely wrong. When the copycats are on their own, that goes up to 62% of the time. So it's pretty easy to see why people are going home with these products by mistake, right? And just to show you how insidious this can be, we did a little survey after, and we showed people a list of products that they'd seen. We included all the branded products, we included all the copycat products, and just to be sneaky, because we're neuroscientists, we threw in some products that they hadn't seen at all. These products were not on the shelves, but they were good representative products for the category. 90% accurate in reporting having seen the brand. How low do you think it goes for the copycats? 13% recall for the copycats. And we know they looked at them. We have their eye movement data. We know that they actually had a conscious level fixation on those products. And what's more interesting is that people were more likely to report having seen a product that we never showed them than they were the copycat products. So they're really not entering memory. They're really not actually becoming something that they're aware of when they're shopping the fixture. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Tim, this is all well and good, but that was on a screen, that was in a nice research facility, wasn't really out shopping, right? So what I'm showing you now, this is brand new data from an actual study that we ran for one of our customers. No one has seen this before out in the public domain, so you're getting a premiere on this. What I want you to focus on are the top left and bottom right corners of this. So those are our rich tea product, and people weren't actually asked to do anything specifically on this study. 205 participants wearing eye-tracking glasses going out doing a complete shop in Tesco, and we didn't actually prompt them for anything, but they happened to encounter these products. The yellow areas represent the amount of attention that people are giving to the brands. The copycats are the red areas, and look how much more attention there is on those copycats. Interestingly enough, it's on the pack, it's on the design, it's not on the price. So people aren't actually necessarily using the price here as the cue, they're just using the familiarity of the packaging. And this data is about as real as it can get. So how, as a brand, can you defend yourself against these copycats? So when I was doing my PhD, I developed an algorithm that works with eye movement data to optimize stimuli, and particularly to optimize product packaging. When we were developing it, we were developing this to optimize for preference. And I'm going to mention a study done with that in a moment. But you can also use this to optimize for standout and to optimize for separation from other products on the shelf. And so this is an application of neuroscience to a marketing problem that will actually help the brands to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. If anybody wants to come up with a snappier title than the one that's going to come up on the screen, please, you're marketers, you can probably come up with something sexier than the gaze-driven evolutionary algorithm. But if you want to know more about this, get in touch with me. I'm going to stop this video, and I'm going to show you that there is a whole load of peer-reviewed research on this. So if you want to take a look at it, I can give you these references, and you can check it out. So we've actually used this gaze-driven evolutionary algorithm. P&G sponsored my PhD, and so they have a copy of it. But moreover, Coca-Cola, who are here, it's a shame Justin's not here today, Coca-Cola were the first commercial company to take a gamble on this. Now, what they did was they actually used it to optimize digital banner ads for the internet. Now, yesterday, if you remember, Justin talked about programmatic media. So this is where you can actually target digital media to the actual customer that's going to view it, the person that's online. So what this algorithm allowed us to do was to optimize the designs of these web ads for specific target demographics. So we could optimize them for gender, we could optimize them for geographical distribution across the UK, we could optimize them for their Coca-Cola drink preference, and so on. We also optimized them for storytelling, which was something that Coca-Cola had missed in the study, in their original designs for the web banner ads. These aren't the ones we did, I have to say that, because Coca-Cola said, we're okay for you to talk about us using this, but don't show them what we actually developed from this, because we don't want anyone to know yet. Typical ad test would be A/B or A/B/C/D, maybe. With the algorithm, you can test 5 million candidate designs systematically, very, very rapidly, and you optimize them. The whole experiment takes about 5 minutes for each participant, so it's very quick to run. Pretty cool technology. I love it. So, take-home messages from all of this. Copycat products will interfere with search at point of sale. They will stop your shoppers from finding your brand. Moreover, they will interfere with the decision-making. They will actually cause people to buy the wrong product. It's inevitable. Now, I didn't really get to talk much about the reduced visual acuity situation, because one of the reasons that we did this looking at sort of blurring and black and white was not just about peripheral vision, but we have an aging population on the planet now. So generally, the visual acuity of the population is going down over time. About 65% of the world's population need to wear corrective lenses, and they frequently don't get their vision checked as quickly as they should do. So a lot of people have degraded vision. A lot of older people have disorders like macular degeneration, cataracts, glaucoma that are reducing their visual acuity. Diabetes results in reduced visual acuity, and what this means is there is potential, a rather sinister potential, for products to be targeted at a section of the community that don't necessarily possess the best in visual acuity. If anyone has a look at our blog, I've written a couple of pieces on this, actually, and there's a bit of an anecdote on there, I think, about my mum actually failing to find a product when she went out shopping. My mum's in her 70s, and she makes this kind of mistake all the time. Copycat brands will affect your bottom line. There's no question about that. But as a brand, there are defense techniques that you can develop, be it using something as sophisticated as that algorithm, or just using slightly more sophisticated testing techniques, like looking at how your products work when they are a bit blurred or the color is taken out. See how they actually work when you do your market testing. The last thing I want to mention is an important point for the digital domain and for e-commerce sites in particular. We heard yesterday about how shopping is switching to mobile devices. Now, remember, I talked about the size of the packs being really important. That goes for the size of the images too. The smaller the images, the harder it is for people to make an accurate decision, the harder it is for them to use all that beautiful detail that's been put onto your pack designs. So you need to keep the designs really clear, really simple. The branding needs to be super strong when you're working in e-commerce to avoid this situation. And that's about it. These are the people that helped me collect the data. Specific thanks to Crispin Hayward from GSK, who actually funded this research, and the British Brand Group, who then jumped on board. If you want to know more about this or anything around neuromarketing, eye tracking, technologies, and so on, that's my Twitter handle, that's my email. And we maintain a pretty good blog that has some great tips on how to use some of these techniques for your market research. Thank you very much for your attention.
Gracias a Tim. Y ahora pasamos a la parte de preguntas. Por favor, si tienen algo que preguntar, alcancen el papelito a los anfitriones y háganlo llegar para adelante. Estaremos esperando sus preguntas. If you had to describe the ideal pack or the ideal label, would it be a bold color with lots of elements or a very simple one? What are the learnings about packaging with eye tracking?
Bold colors will always help with products stand out. But one of the things that people often forget when they're designing is that you might go for a bright color, something like a bright yellow or red. But Coca-Cola wouldn't stand out in a field of copycat products, right? So bright red doesn't necessarily help a product to stand out. It's about actual segmentation from that scene. It's about actually maintaining a distance from the other things around you. And this is really challenging for the brands because typically they will adopt a strong branding color, something with strong association. And then the copycats will come in, and the one thing they probably don't want to do is move away from that strong brand color association. So Coca-Cola recently launched Coke Life, and it's green, right? And so people don't recognize that necessarily as a Coca-Cola product, and that might contribute to one of the reasons why it's not quite performing as strongly as they'll think.
I have a question here. ¿Qué es más importante para usted, el empaque o el POP? ¿Hacia dónde se dirige más la atención del cliente? This is about what's more important, the pack itself or POP material in point of sale?
Okay, that's a good question. So point of sale material, typically, well, it can get a lot of attention when you're out, when it's in the marketplace. One of the things that works very well is things that attract attention in the periphery. And I talked about how peripheral vision doesn't always work so well with some of the things like color and so on. So one of the things that your peripheral vision is specifically designed to do is to move your eyes when something moves in the scene. And so this is a sort of evolutionary process. In case it's something going to leap out of the bushes and attack you, you need to check it out. But this is why things like shelf wobblers and digital displays at point of sale can be particularly effective, because they can create animation, they can create motion cues that will pull attention. And then you can have an association, and there is a direct priming effect that comes from having things like that help to clue people in to find the product at point of sale. One thing I would say, though, is maintain consistency with branding. So we've seen an example in the UK with a very small product where in the digital advertising, they took most of the detail off the pack and they just kept the wording on it. And then actually when the product was on the shelves, there was lots of additional sort of ornamentation on the pack. And so it wasn't immediately recognizable necessarily as the same thing that was being advertised. And so it's really important that if you're going to use these kind of techniques, that you actually make sure that everything stays consistent across those. Make it easy for the shoppers. If there's one thing that Daniel Kahneman's literature tells us is people are lazy in their decision making, and you need to make it as easy as possible for them to make that decision.
Okay, and regarding that, how about those packs that have a lot of information, nutritional information, warnings? Does that actually work in a pack, or?
Not really. From the studies that we've done with real-world shoppers, is that we do see occasional reading of the packs, but it's very limited. And the nutritional information doesn't seem to get that much attention at point of sale. It might get looked at when people get the packs at home, and they're sort of messing around with the packs in the kitchen, right? Or they're sitting on the table like breakfast cereal might. But most of the time, it's not doing anything.
And if you had to recommend something to make it to make it stand out, what would it be? A specific position, a color, some type of letter?
Yeah, so regularity would probably help. So something that's actually consistent across products. So in the UK, they're starting to introduce a sort of standardized traffic light system for nutritional information. So they're using the colors to help to communicate it. You don't necessarily need to read the numbers to know if something's got too much sugar in it or too much fat. So something like that, consistently placed and large enough to be visible at the point of sale, can help.
Okay. My last question would be, is there any use that you would not recommend for eye tracking?
Any use that I wouldn't recommend for eye tracking? Well, I wouldn't recommend doing cricket studies with eye tracking simply because I broke 2 eye trackers while I was doing it. No, there's very little. I mean, as a species, the majority of our decision making is visual, right? Around a third of the neurons that are in our brain that are given over to sensory processing are all about vision. And what this means is that we can pretty much apply eye tracking to any research question. And as a company, we do it to things like for everything from design of dashboards and cockpits and things like that, to how people play sports, to how people use mobile devices, how they browse the web, and also shopper research as well, of course.
Bueno, entonces, si no hay más preguntas, le damos un fuerte aplauso al Dr. Tim Holmes por su colaboración el día de hoy. Este interesante tema del eye tracking aplicado a las empresas.
Thank you.
Y la siguiente presentación es de Dawa Rademacher de Ipsos, que viene desde Nueva York, la sede de Ipsos en Estados Unidos. Y Dawa es el CEO global de Ipsos Market Quest. Es responsable de los estudios estratégicos de marca y consultoría de marketing en Ipsos. Dawa ha trabajado en el lado de la agencia por más de 25 años en empresas globales de investigación como Research International, TNS, Kantar y en consultoras de estrategia como McKinsey en Ámsterdam, Tokio, París y Nueva York. Ha viajado bastante. Ha asesorado a muchas de las empresas Top Fortune 500 en estrategias de crecimiento de marca e innovación. Su tema de hoy es Driving Brand Growth in a Changing World, a New Approach, en el que propondrá un nuevo enfoque para la obtención de insights del consumidor y la toma de decisiones estratégicas que impulsen el crecimiento de las marcas. Por favor, recibimos con un fuerte aplauso a Dawa Rademacher.
Clicker. Hello, sorry, I forgot my clicker. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today. I was asked to do this in Spanish. It's a little rusty, so luckily you have your microphones. I'll do it in English. So today, what I'd like to talk to you about are basically 3 topics. One, briefly, and things that were discussed also yesterday by Tim and by Mikel, about the changes that we're in and the fast changes, both in technology and etc. So we'll talk a little bit about the changes in the industry. Then we'll talk a little bit about what the impact is of brands and how brands relate to people and how we as marketeers should relate to brands. And the third part of the presentation, I will be talking changes it has on how to get insights from people and how to use those insights to help our grower brands. So briefly, and I think many of these things have already been mentioned by the previous speakers, by Tim today and yesterday again by Justin and by Mikael. We're in a connected world. Even today, I see more people on their phones than ever. I think if you don't have a phone, you're a little old-fashioned nowadays. So we're connected 24 hours a day. But it's not just us as people who are connected. It's also appliances getting increasingly connected. These are just some numbers that I saw from a recent article. I was fascinated by the fact that in about 4 years' time, about 40 million washing machines will be online. 3 million vacuum cleaners will be online. And that's fascinating. It means that the amount of data, the amount of behavioral information that these appliances will be giving to us marketeers that we can play with is going to be immense. And as I said, it's also us. We are online, not just through mobile, but through different devices, increasingly more. So this will have a fundamental impact on how we as brands sort of engage with our consumers. And interestingly, from a recent study that Ipsos said, about 83% actually see Wi-Fi as a fundamental right. By the way, interestingly enough, also 75% of the people said that they are worried about privacy. They have privacy concerns with all of this data becoming online. So that's actually a thing that we haven't discussed neither yesterday, we won't be talking about this today, but that's sort of the other side of the other side. So a fundamental right. The other change that I just want to focus on for a few minutes is the big demographic shifts that we're in. And we'll talk a little bit about the aging population and about the rising middle class. First, the aging population. From a recent study, oh, by the way, does anybody not know what a tipping point means? So we all know. So when you're below the tipping point, the total population will go down. So there's the number of children that we have on average in a population. And most of the markets in this region, I happen to have just the Brazilian numbers, which is 1.8, but the same goes for most of the markets in Latin America, is below the tipping point, which means that we have an increasing aging population. It's not just aging, it's also, and I'm sorry for, this is probably the last data-heavy chart that I have in the presentation, but it shows how the different countries' middle class is moving quickly between 2000 and 2013. Actually, you see the biggest move in Peru. We have an increasing, the share of population in middle class and the amount of money they have to spend is, like in Peru, it's going from about 30% in 2000 to nearly 70% of people that is sort of in middle class in this country. This has a massive impact on what people have to spend, on how they engage with brands, and how, as brands, we need to think on how to grow in this sort of changing demographic world we're living in today. So that's about some change. We can talk for hours and hours about all the changes that we're in. I just wanted to touch on two, I think, important elements. Not talking about technological changes, two major shifts. Now, what is the impact on that for brands? Now, first and foremost, I believe it has a massive impact in how people behave. Not necessarily on what they fundamentally make decisions, but it does change how they behave in their path to purchase, in the journey to purchase. But fundamentally, and it's something that we've said yesterday as well, with all these choices that people have, and the amount of time they engage and interact with brands, people, in essence, as yesterday Mikael said, people are lazy. We want to make, in an ever-complicating world, we want to decomplicate our life, right? Which means we need to rely more and more on our unconscious to take shortcuts in the decision process. We're unable in this world to read everything, to see everything, and to make a real rational decision whether I choose brand A or brand B. So we rely more and more on our, we call it sort of our system one, our automatic, intuitive, emotional decision-making process to fast forward our decisions. Now, to some studies that we at Ipsos sort of do instead of asking people simply, and I just want to spend a few times with the charts, it's kind of interesting. We are very much used to ask people feedback on attributes, right? You have these attributes that are related to a brand, and you ask people how much does this brand, or this attribute relate to the brand. And the more it relates, the more we think it describes the brand, right? This is something that most of us are very used to. But thinking about how important the unconscious becomes, we not only measure that, we call the real score, the score that people give on these attributes, we've also measured how quickly people respond. So you see an attribute, how well does this attribute relate to a brand? But if I immediately click on it, I feel probably very emotionally connected with this attribute. If I start to think, all right, that's the difference, all right? So on the horizontal, we see the speed of response. Now, this is a real study that we've done, and actually many of the cases in this presentation are from real studies, so we had to sanitize it a little bit. But the basic thing that we found out from the real scores, we found that people said it's good for the family, natural ingredient, right? A lot of functional attributes. But then if you look at the things that really drives people emotional, unconscious decisions, it had to do protection, trust, gives me control. A lot of things are more emotional driven. So a lot of emotional attributes related to the brand is what drives your unconscious decision making. So that's one. And then secondly, luckily after Tim's presentation, I don't need to spend too much time on that, it's really not, we care as researchers and market researchers less and less what people tell us, but we rely more on what people don't tell us and how they behave. So using sort of facial recognition and not just looking where the eyes go, but also the facial recognition. I think the studies where we use facial recognition, it recognizes, I think, about 60 or 70 different expressions. It sees if you're smiling, if you're not smiling, if you're angry, if you're upset, it's got a lot of emotions that we can detect if you see, so it's getting more and more important to get into the unconscious. That's number one. Now, that is how people make decisions. Now, what is the impact or what is the role of brands in this process? And it's also something that briefly was touched upon yesterday. If you think of it, a brand is nothing more than a network of memories, associations, feelings, experiences, interactions that you've had with a brand. That's what a brand really is, right? And the stronger your relationship with the brand, the more associations that you have, and the more of these associations are linked with each other. There's a theory, right? So in order to test the theory and sort of dive into that, what we have done is say, this is interesting, the concept of an associative network. Let's try to see if we can make that associative network visible in research. So we asked, instead of asking the feedback on a number of attributes, we've just asked people an open-ended question, very simple. Name me anything that comes to mind when you think of this specific brand. Anything. It can be a story, it can be a word, it can be anything that comes to mind. And we have written, and we asked them to type it in. Then we use some text analytics to code them, to bundle these associations together. And then what you see, and this is from a study that we've done, we self-funded it, then you get something like this. Bud Light, this is a study done in the US, right? Where Bud Light is a #1 brand. Personally, I'm not born in America, I can't really, this is not my personal choice. It's what most Americans seems to like, Bud Light. All right, so a lot of the associations that people have with these brands are about fun, horses, keep that in mind, we'll get back to that. Sports, football, commercials. There's a few interesting things here. One, the thickness of the line is how many people mention this, have this association, right? And there are some connections. That means some of these associations are linked. That makes the network even more denser. So good tasting, excellent, refreshing, smooth. And the last observation that I have here is that a number of these observations are very much linked to those occasions where most of the beer in America is consumed. Football and friends. So that makes this network a very strong network. And then we thought, this is interesting, but it's really hard to compare a network like this with other networks. So if I want to know how strong my network is, we need to try to put that into one score. So the way we do that now is we calculate a brand density metric. And these are, I didn't put the brands up here, but these are 4 brands. You can see what the networks look like. And then we calculated the score. The score is based, very simple, on 2 elements. The number of associations that the whole group of people have with the brand, and the average number of associations that each individual have. So the higher the score, the denser and stronger the emotional network is that the people have with the brand. Make sense? And interestingly enough is Bud Light, the number 1. Actually, no, this was a different company, because that's why we took away some of the numbers. This was a recent study that we've done, where you see an incredibly strong correlation between these density scores and the real market shares. Now, I'm not saying, I think this is an incredibly interesting diagnostic to use in your studies and think to dive in. I'm not saying that open-ended questions is purely system 1 thinking, but it gets a little closer than using a pre-list of attributes, right? So that's point 1. And as I said, it is very important not just to have any associations, but associations that are linked to those moments, to those motivations that really drive this category. For beer, it's about being with friends, watching sports. That is the environment, the emotional environment where you want to be associated with. If you take another brand that we also did, like Stella Artois, it's a beer, a strong beer also in the US, very strongly, so it had a strong network, but associated with, you go out with your significant other, you have a fancy dinner, and you order a beautiful bottle of beer. It's a great network, dense network, but it's not where most of the beer consumption takes place. You go out, if I go out with my wife, I'm not going to drink 6 beers. If I want football with my mates, I drink more beer. Anyways, okay? Point 1, keep that in mind. So the second point. 1, it's about unconscious decision making. Number 2, brands are a network of associations. Number 3, what is incredibly important is now I have, as a brand, I have this great network of associations. That's not enough. Now I need to make sure that at the moment of choice, when I'm at the shelf or when I'm online and I want to make a choice, this network needs to be activated, right? I need to come to mind spontaneously. That's my next point. People choose the brands when they come to mind spontaneously, when it really counts. Now, all right, listen. So here is a big communication from Budweiser. The story is, and I tell it shortly, it's a really tearjerker. It's a beautiful little video where this person is racing a tiny little horse, a beautiful horse. Is racing it. It's a breeder, a horse breeder. He's raising it from a small horse. The horse gets bigger and bigger. He's very closely connected to the horse. They know each other. They love each other. The horse grows up to be a big horse. Then the big Budweiser truck comes up and he buys the then bigger horse, which happens to be a Clydesdale horse. And those, and I'll show you in a moment, those are the horses that pull the big old-fashioned Budweiser beer trucks. They're called Clydesdale. Beautiful horses. So the Budweiser buys the horse, goes off, and the guy stays behind, a little tear in his eye, like his horse, his baby is going off into the big world. Years later, the guy that races the horse sees a little video that Budweiser comes to town with this big, beautiful, pulled horses thing, right? So he goes there to see it, and then surprisingly, the then big, beautiful Clydesdale horse looks at him, walks over to him. Oh, come on, now you have to go almost to the end. You cannot show the whole thing. All right, or whatever, we have time. Go ahead.
To my love, took it down. Climbed a mountain and I turned around. Well, I've been afraid of changing, 'cause I've built my life
See, is that beautiful? I don't think it was better to see it than hearing my explanation. I'm sure. I'm sure. Did I see a tear? I see a tear here. Yes. That's the only reason I showed the video. No, but what is the point here? The point here that when we did this study in 2 categories, we asked people, right? I told you, anything that comes to mind. Why? Right, stay here, don't move. All right. So here are some things that people mentioned. And mind you, see right up, the horse, the Clydesdale horses, is we call this a brand asset that is being used at the point of sale in many places, by Budweiser. So what they very effectively do, they first build the network of associations through the commercials, and then at the point of purchase, they use it as a real brand asset, and they activate it through pictures like this, on the bottle, on the packaging. So it is building, so the point is, you can consciously build an associative network, and then you can activate it at the point of purchase. So important for all the marketeers here, think about what are your real brand assets that you own, that are yours, and how can you use them with that mental network and activate it at the point of purchase, all right? But it's still not enough. So you have these associations, you're activating at the point of purchase. It's still not enough. Because, for example, what we always thought what was true, we thought as long as we are in the consideration set, as long as we are one of the 3 or 4 brands that people consider, it's cool. Well, let me tell you, it's not. Right? For example, again, a study that we recently did showed that if you ask people what kind of brands do you consider when you buy a mobile phone, the majority would say Samsung. Samsung is, for most people, in the consideration set. Unfortunately, when we had a conversation with the senior marketeers at Samsung, they said, but actually, in terms of market share, we're number 2. What's going on? The reason for that is when we looked at the top of mind, first mentioned, then suddenly Apple shows up. So maybe less people consider it, but for most people it's top of mind. So the next time, if you think about how to make your brand relevant, it's not enough to be in the consideration set, you need to be top of mind. And then finally, again, it is also not enough to be, so you're ranked first, you've got a great network, you're activating it when it counts, but you're not available. And available is not just saying I'm not available in a store, but I'm also maybe not emotionally available. My price is too high. I happen to be not online, where people do most of the purchase. So the whole thing can fall apart if you're not available through the whole sort of journey that people take in your category. And to show you, and again, I've taken out the numbers, but these are real numbers, a real case, where we calculated your brand equity. These are your brand equity scores that most people are familiar with, right? And then we adjusted it for availability. And suddenly you see completely different scores if you adjust for availability that were very much more precise, predicting market share than without the availability. So taking all of these points together, if you want to be successful as a brand, you need to be salient, you need to have that strong sort of mental network. You need to form strong relationships for those moments where most of the people use your product. You need to be top of mind, and you need to be easily available. Sounds simple, but it's not so simple. That was the second part of the presentation. The third part, what does all of this mean for market research, for consumer insights? And I quickly want to go through 4 points. We need to have, since people make decisions quicker and quicker and quicker, we're always online, we cannot wait months and months to give you results of a study. Everything needs to be faster and easier. We'll talk a few minutes on that. Secondly, as we said, we cannot rely anymore on asking people there, just asking simple questions in a questionnaire. I think, to be honest, over time, this whole idea about a questionnaire will fade away. We need to interview people when they buy it, in context. We need to focus on system 1, behavioral economics, social listening. We'll talk about that for a few minutes. There was a lot of, as you heard from Justin yesterday, there is so much data available. We need to start seeing how we can pull all of these things together. And finally, it's also not enough just to have insights. One of the biggest challenges that we have as marketeers, how do we activate, that's point one, how do we activate those insights in real business recommendations? And point two, how do we socialize it? How do we make sure that everyone in our organization is behind us, believes in these recommendations, and is willing to go where we want them to go? Let me quickly go through each of them, because I believe there are about 5 new frontiers, 5 new things we have to break through as an industry. Number one, and this is an example of I think the future of big, let's say, users and attitude studies. As just an example. In the past, these studies used to be questionnaires of about 45 minutes long, an hour long. It takes 5 months, get a big deck of data, and you have no idea what to do, right? Now, in this world, we believe things need to be much faster. So you start with a short, quick 15-minute questionnaire. That's it. Maybe a little diary. You sit down, you form an hypothesis. Shall we go left? Shall we go right? Do we already have an idea of a new concept? You follow up with maybe another module, maybe a pop-up community, some more social listening, maybe a deep dive. You sit again, you talk, what is a new hypothesis? This is a new modular incremental approach that will allow you to make decisions instead of after 6 months. You can start making your first decisions after 4 weeks. And I think that's where the future is, especially for these bigger studies. Point two. We spoke about this many times, so we can spend a little bit less time on this topic. The new breakthrough is behavioral economics. Let's start looking at what people do instead of asking people what they think they do, right? And for example, one of the things that we are starting to play with is asking people to download an app, and the app uses your sensors in your phone to see what time you wake up. Because then, the moment you pick up your phone after 5 hours of not being picked up. What time you eat. Do you take the car to work? Do you take the train to work? And if you take a car, are you a crazy driver? Are you a careful driver? All of this can be now measured through this app. If I ask all of you to use this app for a month, and I'll take that data, I probably know more of each of you than if I were to ask you a questionnaire of 15, 20 minutes. So this is the kind of things that we are moving very quickly to. And of course, the facial recognition, as we said earlier. Social listening. I think the word social listening is also an old, faded word. It's more about social intelligence. And the big thing is, how can we use text mining? That to me is the new, how can we get intelligence out of all of this data? A quick example is here, something that we've done in the US for automotive, where we looked at, I think it was about 600,000 posts on the topic of cars around the Lexus. And Lexus, for those who don't know, is positioned in the US as a performance showing off kind of car. And if we coded that data along those emotional motivations, the moment they want to think of what car to buy, like getting awareness of the brand, considering to buy one, and just before they buy one. Interestingly enough, start thinking about cars. Yes, Lexus is being seen as a car to show off. When they consider buying a car, again, it's showing off. But think about it yourself. The moment they're about to buy the car, suddenly other things become important, like security, experience. Like, okay, I want to have this cool car, but just before I buy it, does it have a child seat? Now, Lexus, before they looked at this, never thought of this. And now they changed their communication to where people are in the journey. And just before they buy it, you get bombarded with a lot of information about the Lexus that is about safety and security, things that they would normally think is associated with Lexus. Right? So, thinking differently about how to use social listening. Connecting the dots. I think a big point here, sort of a big future point, is instead of putting all the data that we have on one platform, data is nothing. Unless, as Tim said in his, you said it like it's not data, it's about knowledge, it's about insights. So the big step is, as a company, what you want to capture are insights. But what are insights? Insights is really intelligently looking at your data, translating it into an insight, and putting that insight in a platform, wherever that insight comes from. Now, the biggest challenge, I think, as an industry that we have is how to curate the data and how to translate the data to insights. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This could be a whole other conference, but curation of data and changing it into insights and putting the insights on a platform, I think, is the next frontier. And then finally, moving from insights and moving from all the stuff that I just discussed to business recommendations, acting on the recommendations, and getting the whole organization with you to actually drive change quickly. So moving from insights to foresights and driving impact, I think is also the sort of next challenge that we're in. So the three things that we discussed: the world is changing. We have to manage our brands differently in this changing environment. And we need to break some of these frontiers that we have in marketing insights. I think that's a challenge that we have as an industry. And with that, I'd like to end my presentation. Thank you very much.
So Jawa, it's more about combining different methodologies now then?
I believe it is. Where we used to think we have a problem, we're doing some market research, we're creating a questionnaire, we get the data in, we analyze it, and we present it. Now it is we have a problem. What do we already know? Let's start with a quick social listening exercise, see what we can figure out without asking any questions. Maybe do a quick questionnaire, but maybe do some ethnographic, do some behavioral. Think more creative about how to really get into the heart of the consumers. I think that's what we need to do.
Okay. And do you think the qualitative approach is as valuable as what used to be in previous times now that we have so much social listening?
Yeah.
Yes?
Actually, I think it's becoming more important than ever. First of all, I don't like, especially in this area of social listening, etc. I don't believe in the word qualitative so much, as if there is a difference between qualitative to inspire people but not relevant, but not credible, and quantitative data is boring but it's very credible, right? I don't believe in that anymore. I think a big part of qualitative research now is to use ethnography, different types of insights to really get under the skin of people. That's number one. And the second frontier for qualitative research is to the curation, is to help companies take that data, translate it into insights, which is a big creative part, and putting that into sort of a insights or a knowledge database. So I think it's very relevant.
Here's a question about curation. Tell us more about it.
Who
does it? What do you need to know to get insights from data?
That's a big question. So first of all, what is curation? It is what in the past we would call, it's kind of the new fancy word, but it's nothing more to, you have a report, you have a lot of data, but in general, a research project will not give you more than 2 or 3 real nuggets, real deep insights. That's what I'm talking about. Now, who does it? Well, to give you an example, there are some really big clients of ours that have recruited people to do specifically this task. That's what they do. They're curators. For most of our other clients, these are either the consumer insights people or it's us. I just believe it's a task that needs to be given more importance for most of our clients.
Okay, and how do you think that organizations should change with this new approach of hybrid research? How agencies and brands are organized around marketing research? Do you think we need a new structure, a new approach?
Yeah, that's also sort of a big question. I believe the relationship between the company's insights team, the bigger sort of organization, and us as sort of partners, both the insights group, the communication group, and different groups, I think the future is that we need to work much closer together. I'll give you a few examples. I know that Some of our clients, for example, when I talked to Tim earlier on, they have a company that does a lot of this sort of neuroscience work. I also know some of our clients bought the stuff themselves and let's do it ourselves. We can do it ourselves. I believe you probably get more deeper expertise and insights if you work together with partners that have that expertise. So I believe the role of us is to work in closer partnership, especially when you do this more incremental approach, more consultative approach. We need to work closer together. And the insights group in many of our organizations have to become more of a strategic advisory group in an organization, and maybe spend less time on doing the actual work. Let us do that. So that the insights team can move up and become strategic partners to an organization. I think when you're at that level, you can really drive, because more and more business value is driven by deep consumer insights. So I think that whole combination of insights people, clients, and partners will have to change more and quicker. Soon, yeah. Yes.
And in terms of building brands, do you think it's different? So you have to have different strategies depending on the life stage of the brand? I mean, at the beginning, perhaps it's more functional, then more emotional.
That last, I think that's not the right answer. I believe, yes, of course there are changes, differences in not only your life stage, it also differs by category. If you are marketing, let's say a medicine, somewhere in there you have to have more functional attributes than in some food companies. But I believe this story, what we told here, how brands grow and how as marketeers we need to help brands grow, is the same for every category, it's the same for every brand. And I strongly believe, actually, for a young brand, and we've had a lot of conversations with disruptive brands like an Uber, an Amazon, and a Google, you name it. It's even more important to start building emotional sort of networks. The sooner you have that emotional bond, the more likely it is that you build walls to protect yourself from your competitors. So I almost would say it's even more important to build emotional relationships.
That cannot be copied.
No, exactly. And when you own that emotional space, it's really hard for competitors to come in and also own it. Look at Coca-Cola. They own sort of joyful happiness. That's the space that they globally own, which may mean something different in different cultures, but it is a cultural, local, joyful happiness. It's really hard for another brand to come in and also own it.
Bueno, agradecemos muchísimo entonces a Douwe and the Maker, le damos un fuerte aplauso.
Thank you.